nowadays you got to have that confidence because people nowadays.
Before we get straight into the podcast, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Declan Kirby GAA Star. Declan Kirby GAA Star Championship Journey. It's a series of GAA team children's books written by primary school teacher and GAA coach Michael Egan. You can check it out in the link in the description down below, of course, as well. Follow the trials and tribulations of Declan Kirby and his team at Smithgreen Gaelic Football Club, recently formed but promising GAA team. The book is now available in Easons and all good bookshops, so check it out in the description down below, and let's get straight into it. I suppose moving on from that, we'll run through the hurling games. Obviously 2 games that took place in the Senior Hurling Championship and obviously a few other lower tier games as well. But it was Waterford 428, Tipperary 227. Another huge win for Waterford. I mean, to beat Galway and then to go and beat Tipperary, like back-to-back wins. I mean, tremendous stuff from Waterford to go and beat another top team, because I think a lot of people had Tipperary and Galway as the 2 closest teams to Limerick this year, and Waterford gone and took them both out.
Yeah, absolutely superb from Waterford. I didn't expect to see it coming, given Tipp's first half performance against Limerick. I thought they'd have enough to beat this Waterford team, but geez, Waterford, they came out of the traps quickly, and even Stephen Bennett wasn't contributing as much to the team this time around. Like Austin Gleeson, I'll say this before I say it again, the guy is so underrated as a player. Like, he might be inconsistent over the last few years. He just scored 1-3 on Saturday. He scored 2 sidelines. This guy is an absolutely brilliant hurling player and should be recognised as that. And Waterford in general, I suppose that goes down to the manager, Liam Cahill. He's drilled something into this Waterford team. He's done absolutely brilliantly. And to even look at the way they played Saturday, well, I suppose Tipp will rule them goal chances. Like that moment, I think it was 5 minutes left in the game. I think it was John McGrath going through a goal. He flicks it inside. Surely the next guy will take it. No, the next guy, Seamus Camden, he puts it wide. And you think, geez, are this Tipp team actually going to get a goal? And then Sean O'Brien makes a miraculous save. And then the next puck out, Waterford scored a goal. And that's the game. Look, I think Tipp, it's kind of a strange one. It really is a strange one to comprehend, because they were, in most people's eyes, All-Ireland contenders this year. And they were so kind of last year as well. I don't know, were they just a once every 3 or 4 years All-Ireland team in many ways? That's the vibe I get off Tipperary anyway. And even their older players, like, for instance, Noel McGrath, their centre forward, only scored 1 point in the entire championship. I know he's a legend for Tipperary hurling, but maybe it's time to bring on these younger players like Jake Morris, Owen Connolly, Andy Ormonds, Conor Bowe, etc. Try and bait these players in quickly as possible, because the older players, yes, Seamus Camden scored 2 goals the last day, John O'Dwyer scored 4 points, but most of them older players, I think they're coming to the end now, and Liam Sheedy has to bite his tongue a little bit and bring in these old younger players, because they definitely need them. Like, you could see Waterford had the legs on them all over the pitch at times in that game, and it's a worrying time for Tipperary hurling if they don't bring the younger players sooner rather than later. But hats off to Waterford, they won the 2nd week in a row where they weren't expected to win, and considering the first 2 games of the championship, actually, against Clare and against Laois, they were particularly poor. Maybe it's a sign not to peak too early and peak at just the right time. And I think Waterford are peaking at the right time. And fair play to Liam Cahill, fair play to all the players. And long may it continue, because they'll be going into that Limerick game now full of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I don't think anyone really seen it coming. Like, I know they were impressive enough in the league at different parts, but the league was almost like a glorified challenge league in many ways. You couldn't really look too much into it. I mean, we've seen how impressive Galway were, and then they go out and lose 2 games in the championship. And for Waterford, yeah, they were very underwhelming against Clare, against Laois. They just about got over the line. Like, Laois were actually leading going into the final 5 minutes and could have potentially actually won the game. So, like, quite incredible for Waterford to find something within themselves to go and do what they did against Galway and then against Tipperary. Like, even the likes of Peter Hogan, Jack Prendergast, and even Desi Hutchinson, like, when you get him on the ball as well, he can work wonders. And like we said with Austin Gleeson, like, he was probably so highly rated that he became underrated in a weird way. And now he's, producing that kind of form in a different kind of way to what he'd normally play, like playing further up the pitch. So very interesting from Waterford, and obviously Limerick next for them. And I mean, look, I mean, they're probably the closest team to Limerick right now. It's probably it's probably fair enough to say that, and that will certainly be an interesting game.
It certainly will, yeah. And considering Limerick have 3 weeks without a game, that'll be a big test to Limerick's resolve if they can beat Waterford. Seeing how well Waterford played as underdogs, there was nothing on them. There was no pressure. This is a scary prospect for Limerick, no matter how well they're playing. And Waterford will be looking for revenge after last year's All-Ireland final. That's another aspect to this game, which makes it so interesting. So Limerick will definitely have their hands full with this tie here, and Waterford will not lie down whatsoever. Liam Cahill will not let them. It's going to be a very interesting game to see the tactical side of it as well. You see, will Limerick conserve their energy in the first half and blitz them in the second half like they did against Tipperary, or will they go hell for leather in the first few minutes, which they did last year, not so much this year. So it should be very interesting to see what happens. But Waterford will not lie down in this game. This will be a tough game to call. I can actually see Waterford pulling a surprise. I know this will be a surprise to some people, but I just see Waterford winning this game, considering they've had 3 wins on the bounce, considering in them 3 weeks, Limerick have had no game. Like, that's going to be a big factor in this game, to see the fitness of these players. Like Waterford, the adrenaline will be pushing them on. Limerick, you just wonder, will it be the same as other Munster champions down through the years? Will they struggle with that long gap without a game? So it should be very, very interesting, this game. And Liam Cahill against John Kiley, it's going to be an epic encounter, definitely.
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of a new rivalry in many ways in hurling. Obviously played each other twice last year. Once, of course, in the Munster final, and obviously once in the All-Ireland final. Like, and I suppose the interesting thing about those games was there was no goals in either game, funny enough. And like, obviously for Waterford coming into this game on the back of scoring 4 goals against Tipperary, scored a couple of goals against Galway as well. So, I mean, they're certainly a team that's coming in with a lot of confidence. And I mean, I tipped them to beat Tipperary personally, just because I haven't seen enough of Tipperary's fight so far this year, and we'll discuss that in a brief moment. But I don't know, like, Limerick just looks so good in that second half against Tipperary. Like, they really, really clicked into gear, and I personally, I just don't see any way Limerick don't win this All-Ireland from here. Like, but I don't know, I could be wrong.
We'll have to see. Like, it's going to, like, the Munster Championship, the Munster champions down through the years, they're without a game for a long time. Not so much last year, because it was a strange year for all concerned. Like, it was a 2-week gap. This is like a 3-4 week gap now, like it was in the previous years. You see Cork in 2014, they struggled against Tipperary. They absolutely got slaughtered. 17, Cork got beaten by Waterford. Tipperary got beaten by Galway, I'm sure, one year as well. Limerick themselves got beaten by Clare in 2013. They got absolutely slaughtered for many parts of that game. So it can play a factor, especially this year. It's back to normality a small bit rather than last year. So this will be a challenge for these Limerick players. And Waterford, they won't lie down in this game. Like, most people tipped Galway and Tipperary to win this game, and voila, Waterford just put it out of the bag. They could do so again. We'll have to wait and see. But this will be a close game. It won't be like last year, annihilation in many ways. It will be a very, very close game. Waterford just, over the last few games, they've just had it in the tank to beat Tipperary and Galway. I just wonder, can they do it again against Limerick? Seeing as the last few performances, confidence can go a long way, and Liam Cahill will be buying these players to try and beat Limerick. And I suppose if this Limerick team is going to be beating this superb Limerick team, it's going to be now, when they're without a game for 3 weeks, when they're a bit rusty, and Waterford, they have to do what Tipperary didn't do, put them away in the first half, put them away so they will not come back into the game. Do Waterford have the potential for that? I think they have the youngsters for that, to run the legs off Limerick. Like, Waterford are more pacey than Limerick in many ways. Like Limerick are big, strong fellas. Waterford's are pacey and around the likes of Desi Hutchinson, Patrick Cord. They'll be buzzing around the Limerick quarterbacks in the first half, I'm sure. Given Limerick's match fitness over the last few weeks. Well, I might be wrong now, given the Cork team at 14 and 17, the Tipp team at 15 aren't up to Limerick's level right now, or even the Limerick team back at 13 aren't up to that Limerick level. So it should be very interesting to see, but this will be a very, very close game. Can Waterford win it? The proof will be the pudding next week, but one thing is for certain, Liam Cahill will not lie down without trying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely going to be a very interesting game, all right, between the two, and definitely one worth keeping an eye on this weekend. I suppose just discussing Tipperary, like since they won the All-Ireland in 2019 for Liam Sheedy's men, it's been 2 wins in the championship and 4 defeats, and those wins were against Cork and Clare, which I suppose most people, I mean, look, listen, Cork could go on to an All-Ireland final, but I think most people would probably not perceive Cork and Clare in the top 4 or top 5 in terms of teams in the country, but I mean, Sheedy's loyalty has probably cost him maybe a little bit. Like even after the game, he was very loyal to his players. He didn't speak bad about them at all, which you have to kind of commend in many ways. But yeah, like it is a bit of a rebuilding job, and you would wonder if he's the right man to do it. I mean, he's earned the right to stay on considering what he's done across 2 spells with Tipperary, but definitely a lot of question marks over Tipperary at the moment.
There is, yeah, and especially the old player debate. Like I mentioned this beforehand as well in our chat. Noel McGrath only scored 1 point in the entire championship. Seamus Cannon scored 2 goals and did not much else. He missed the target for the last attempt there. John O'Dwyer, in fairness, played well enough. He scored 4 points, but still, you just wonder, can they just bring in them young players to try and excel? Another thing as well, look at their top 6 scores. I think I have a rough idea of this. Yes, their top 4 scores are all forwards, the likes of Jake Morris, Seamus Cannon, John O'Dwyer, and of course Jason Ford. But when you look at their 5th top scorers, correct me if I'm wrong now, but I think it's Ronan Marr, their fullback. Like, that's an incredible statistic. And even you think forwards like Dan McCormack or Noel McGrath, who's been playing centre forward, would have enough to step up to the plate. But look at them stats this year. They haven't. They certainly haven't. And it's a worry for Liam Sheedy in many ways that these older players haven't regained his trust in many ways. Like John O'Dwyer has, Seamus Cannon has kind of, yes, he scored them 2 goals, but he's kind of, been in the decline over the last few years. Jason Ford, I think, is probably the only one of them forwards that really, really stepped up in all them games. He's been instrumental for Tipperary keeping them in games. So it's going to be interesting what happens to Tipperary next year. Are they willing to proceed to stick with Liam Sheedy? I don't know, will they after the last 2 years? But maybe they'll give it 1 more year. And if he fails again next year by reaching only a quarterfinal, which isn't good enough for Tipperary hurling, I've known this for years. Like an all-Ireland quarterfinal is not good enough for Tipperary hurling, and you will not be judged by how many quarterfinals you reach. You'll be judged on how many Liam McCarthy's you get in the trophy cabinet. That's always been the way for Tipperary. So, look, we'll see what happens in year 4 with Liam Sheedy next year, and if he fails again next year by reaching only a quarterfinal, I think it's curtains. But we'll have to see. He has to blood in the young players next year, at least try to blood them in, because the older players don't seem to be repaying him with his trust.
Yeah, and I suppose you could have a situation then where you have a number of retirements, and then you have to bring through all these, young lads into the team and kind of, put all your trust and reliance on them. And I suppose it'd be a lot of pressure for some of those players. You kind of wonder why he hasn't, maybe played the odd player here or there, like Owen Connolly maybe in the odd game, or Conor Bowe in this game. Like you would wonder why he hasn't made those changes sooner. A bit like what Cork have done in the league, for example, the way they've kind of used Alan Connolly and Shane Barrett and Jack O'Connor in a few different games. And you can tell that those players know their role in the squad. And I suppose speaking of Cork, like obviously beating Dublin 226 to 24 points. I'd imagine as a Cork man yourself, you're delighted anyway to be back in All-Ireland semi-final. For myself as a Dublin man, not so much. But look, I think this game went very much as most people expected. Like, Dublin caused Cork a couple of problems here or there, but Cork were always in control and realistically always going to win this game.
They were, yeah, and it is unfortunate about Dublin what happened with the COVID cases, and I think they really put it up to Cork in the first 10 minutes, and Cork withstood that pressure. I suppose that shows a great sign of a team that we did, and Tim O'Mahony has been outstanding in this championship, run through the field with that first goal. Shane Kingston got another goal in this championship. So the positive for this Cork team, we're getting goals, and we haven't got them in the last few years. We got goals to get us really to halftime with a very good position on Saturday night. And that was the win of the game, getting them 2 goals in that first half. And Dublin did put it back to 4 points, but I think that was as far as Dublin got in the end. And it was plain sailing for Cork down in the game then after that. And as you say, with the younger players brought in, the likes of Shane Barrett, Alan Connolly, I think Jack O'Connor's been absolutely outstanding. He probably should have got noticed in 2018 or earlier than that, because he's formed for a club side called Sarsfields down here. Has been absolutely tremendous in the Cork Senior Hurling Championship. But he's got noticed now, and he's a superb player. And the onus is not so much on Patrick Horgan now. That's the positive. And the likes of Shane Kingston, Jack O'Connor, Shane Barrett, and Alan Connolly, when called upon, are doing well. Seamus Hartney's doing well again this year after averaging 4 points a game last year. So, look, the signs are very good going to the Kilkenny game. As for Dublin, look, it is a strange with Dublin. Like Shane Downing and Brendan Cummins were discussing last night. Is this overachieving for Dublin or underachieving? And some people said to Shane Downing at the end of the game, it's neither. That's where Dublin expect to be. But I suppose with the Dublin talent they have coming through at under 20, I suppose as a Dublin fan yourself, you probably expect Dublin to reach an All-Ireland semi-final and given the resources there as well. So, and Matty Kenny's a astute coach as well as that. So that's an interesting topic, I suppose. What do you think yourself, Aaron? Do you think they're overachieving or underachieving in a way?
Yeah, like I think maybe, yeah, Shane Dowland's probably kind of hit the nail on the head there in many ways, because I think for Dublin, for a county like Dublin, the size of Dublin, everyone knows the resources, the funding, blah, blah, blah. Like everyone kind of knows the scenario there. And obviously, majority of that goes to football. And like we've probably got some of the best hurlers in the country playing football, like Cormac Costello, brilliant hurler for Whitehall Comkill. I've seen him a few times. And Conor O'Callaghan, obviously phenomenal for Coola down the years. So even Lee Gannon, who's coming through, is a very talented hurler, but he might end up going on to play football. Dermot Connolly's been another fantastic hurler, for whatever reason doesn't want to play with the senior hurlers after retiring. So it is an interesting one. Like I wouldn't say we're underachieving, and we're probably not overachieving either. Like beating Galway is definitely overachieving, but at the same time it's a tough one. Like it's a hard one to kind of put the nail on the head. But with the players coming through at the moment, the young players coming through from under 20 level, it definitely would be an underachievement if we didn't get to an All-Ireland semi-final over the next 3 to 5 years. Like I think with the fact that you're seeing Tipperary are slowing down, Galway are slowing down. Okay, they have great underage players coming through, and you're even seeing like Clare, do they have a good underage crop coming through? It's hard to know. So it's going to be tough. Like even Wexford, maybe they won't be as good now without Davy Fitz there. So it's going to be interesting. And like I would expect though Dublin to be thereabouts, or to be challenging, but it's a hard one to know, because like what I was saying earlier, like you've got so many like brilliant hurlers that go on to play football, unfortunately. So that's always going to be a bit of a hindrance, I suppose.
Yeah, it's actually, I had Daniel Hussey during the week on the podcast. It's actually very interesting. The exact opposite happens here in Cork as well. Like he was saying, Conor O'Callaghan's the best hurler you have in the county, and he's not even playing for the hurling team. The same down here, Jamie Callahan's our best footballer, and he's not even playing football. So it's a difficult one to try and get the balance of both. I suppose Galway have down through the years, but speaking to RF at the start of the year, he was saying North Galway is mostly football, South Galway is mostly hurling. So maybe that's probably one of the reasons why. So look, it is a difficult one to try and balance both, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see what happens with Dublin hurling. See Davy Fitz obviously go away during the week from the Wexford Hurlers, as we expected, obviously. will he now take up the Dublin job if Matty Kenny? But see what Dublin achieved this year. I can't see Dublin getting rid of Matty Kenny, in all honesty. So it should be interesting to see how Dublin. The main thing for them, I think, is to build on the performances this year. They got to an All-Ireland quarter-final. They were lucky in many ways in the Leinster final after the COVID outbreak. So, look, it's positives this year, but the main thing is to build on it and achieve even bigger things next year. That's the main thing for Dublin. And even question, will Lee Rush and Danny Sutcliffe stick around now? I think after the performances this year, I think they will. I think they will stick around. But I think they need to bring the younger players through sooner rather than later and try and get their wins under their belts. Maybe even Leinster Championship is a realistic game for Dublin, but we'll have to see. But it should be very interesting down through the years. But it is an interesting topic how to balance the two in both football and hurling for Dublin and Cork and Galway in some aspects as well. Well, they've achieved it down through the years somewhat.
Yeah. Like I suppose Galway have found the balance, and obviously Cork, I remember, won a double at one stage, and I think in 1990 when they won football and hurling in the same year. Like I feel like Dublin would probably be the only team many people would think of that could do the same, but it is a tough one to kind of find the balance. And I think the defence is definitely there for Dublin, like with Owen O'Donnell and Dara Gray, James Madden, Paddy Smith, and even Alan Nolan in goal. Like the defence is there. It's just about finding that balance and attack and finding, getting, if Danny Sutcliffe is going to play, they need to get him more involved and get him more in the game, because when he is on his game and when he is at his absolute best, like he can really shoot the lights out and cause all sorts of problems. I suppose for Cork, just touching on them, like obviously it's Kilkenny next, and I suppose like when you have like Tim O'Mahony's been brilliant so far for Cork this year, obviously brilliant in the Dublin game, man of the match in my opinion. I didn't see the game live, but I seen the highlights and he was absolutely exceptional. Pat Horgan, brilliant as always. And going into Kilkenny next, and like what we're saying, like Limerick having that 3-week break, Kilkenny have had an even longer break. So, I mean, real opportunity there for yourselves to go in there with a bit of momentum and potentially catch the cat's cold.
It is definitely. And even look at Kilkenny last year against Waterford, they got caught cold. And Waterford, the energy they had in the second half was enough to beat them. And the main thing about Cork going into this game, like in 2018, the last time we reached our semi-final against Limerick, what let us down badly was our bench. We didn't have much on the bench. We only really had Mikey Callahan to come on, Jack O'Connor, but he wasn't really established at that point. Fast forward 3 years, and our bench looks absolutely stacked now. The likes of Shane Bowers, Alan Connolly, Decky Dalton there as well. Look, it's a brilliant bench to have, and I'd be confident going in as a Cork fan. I haven't over the last few years going to semi-finals or quarterfinals, but with this team, with the legs that this team has, with the goals that we could potentially get to win the game in the end, look, it's going to be on. But what would concern me going into this game as a Cork fan is Kilkenny's, their strength all over the field. They are not particularly pacey as us, but they're more built than us. The likes of TJ Reid, Cody have been exceptional this year. Dara Corcoran at wing back's been brilliant. So it's going to be a difficult game for Cork to get through, but maybe it's a chance in the first half, especially, to catch this Kilkenny team cold, considering they haven't played for 3 weeks or so, even longer than Limerick, obviously. So maybe it is a chance to get those goals early, like we did against Dublin on Saturday night. And like we did score 2 goals in the first half against Clare as well. Maybe if we score maybe 3 goals in that first half, we'll be well on the road to victory in this game. But I don't want to seem overconfident as a Cork fan now, because there's still a game to play, obviously. But the signs are looking good for us to beat Kilkenny. Obviously, the last few meetings haven't gone according to plan. I think the last time we beat them, and the only time we beat them over the last few years, I think since 2006, the championship was 2013, and that Kilkenny team seemed to be on the way down after a brilliant few years. So, look, our record against Kilkenny isn't that great, but I think our team has the potential to beat Kilkenny, especially in the first half when they're a bit leggy, a bit short of match fitness, and this should be a very interesting tie. And an All-Ireland final for either of these teams, definitely they'll take that at the start of the year. Obviously, Kilkenny and Cork, historically will be going for Liam McCarthy's, but for the development of both sides, I think an All-Ireland final is a brilliant prize to have for these teams at the end of the season. So it should be a very interesting game. As a Cork fan, I'm going in as a bit of confidence arising.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine so, because they definitely have, to get that win over Dublin, even against Limerick, like you had opportunities in that game, and maybe if you had shown a bit more killer instinct kind of in the final 5 to 10 minutes, it could have been a lot closer than people think. And I think a lot of Limerick fans as well even kind of fear Cork more in some ways, because you have this kind of underage success and these players that are coming through. Obviously, you were supposed to be in a under-20 final this weekend. There's been a COVID outbreak between the under 20, so it looks like that game's got postponed. But like generally speaking, like you've a lot of very talented hurlers coming through there at the moment, and it does feel like, we've been saying this before, but at some point over the next 3 to 5 years, you probably will crack the code and win an All Ireland, and whether it's at Limerick's expense or not, I'm not sure, but certainly like Cork are definitely moving in the right direction anyways.
They are definitely, and even looking at our under-20 win over Limerick, we're in a minor final now against Waterford, so things are looking well on the up for Cork hurling going down through the years. And we actually didn't win an under-20 before 2020 since, I don't know, was it 2000 or was it the 90s even? So that's a positive for Cork hurling down through the years. But we haven't won an All-Ireland since 2005 in hurling. Like, that's like a famine here, 16 years. Like, it's a pretty long time. And I think this current crop can definitely win the All-Ireland. Look, we could have the legs at Limerick, considering Limerick beat us before, and we weren't performing at our very best against Limerick. If we perform at our very best in the next 2 games, who knows, we could definitely win the All-Ireland. But a lot of Cork fans saying we have the hand on the trophy already. Look, we don't yet. We don't yet. We have to play Kilkenny first, get over that, and maybe a bit of confidence will seep into our system going into a game against either Limerick or Waterford. But look, there's a game to play against Kilkenny. We must not take our eye off the ball, and we have to beat Kilkenny on Sunday to get to an All-Ireland final. But it should be very interesting to see, not just this year, how Cork develops over the next few years with the under-20 challenge coming through. It looks like we could even win a second under-20 All-Ireland in a row. That'll be absolutely brilliant for the county. And with some brilliant players coming up through the ranks, the likes of Padraig Power and Dara Flynn as well as that. So, and Kieran Joyce looks at ball or centre back. So, look, we have the players. The problem is over the last few years was the execution. We've executed the skills. We've executed the clinical nature of our team over the last few games, scoring 3 goals, I think, an average over the last few games. So it's been absolutely brilliant in that point of view. But obviously there's a game to play next Sunday. We must not take the eye off the ball and try and beat Kilkenny for the first time in the championship since 2013. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, and I suppose for Cork fans to be like saying there's one hand on the trophy is definitely a bit premature. Like Kilkenny, like they were brilliant in the Wexford game. Okay, they weren't brilliant in the Dublin game in particular. They didn't need to be really. So it's an interesting one with Kilkenny. It's almost a bit like Mayo in the football, where you don't really know like how Kilkenny are coming into this game. Like they've kind of slipped under the radar in many ways with the fact that they didn't, with all due respect to Dublin, they didn't have to play one of the top teams in a provincial final, as opposed to Limerick or Waterford. Those 2 teams have played top teams already this year. I suppose just touching on Offaly, like a 41 point. Well, they scored 41 points and ended up winning by 21 points. It was Offaly 41. It was Derry 214. We were kind of touching on Offaly earlier, but I suppose great to have Offaly back at the top table of hurling, like not at the top table, but back in the Joe McDonagh Cup and certainly rising. And they'll probably go into the Joe McDonagh Cup as arguably favourites.
They have to go in as favourites, and it's absolutely brilliant the job that Big Fendi has done. And I suppose it was expected they'd win the Christy Ring Cup. Like, they should have won it years ago with the talent they have at their disposal, the history they have. But you even see Michael Doyle shaking hands with Michael Fennelly at the end, saying, "Look, you've done an absolutely amazing job." Like, that unity in Offaly hurling hasn't been seen in years, and it's a very good sign for Offaly hurling fans, definitely. And but I suppose it's one step at a time. Like, they consider themselves way above Derry. They shouldn't have lost it down last year. And now they're the Joe McDonagh Cup. Anything's possible now for them. They're playing Division 1 hurling as well, which will definitely play to their advantage. Like the only other team playing Division 1 hurling in the Joe McDonagh next year are Antrim. So you'd imagine that will be the battle next year between Offaly and Antrim. So it should be a very interesting Joe McDonagh campaign. Offaly definitely have the players, like the footballers. It is progressing very, very nicely, and not may continue, because obviously we'd love to see Offaly. The more hurling teams up at the top table, the better. And Offaly look like they have it in the bag with Mick Fenley now in charge, Michael Dykeman, Shane Lowry pushing it there as well. So it looks very, very good for Offaly hurling. And as I said, long may it continue. It looks like they'll win the Joe McDonagh Cup next year, but obviously they'll have to keep the head down and drive this on now, because this is a huge opportunity for them to get to Liam McCarthy as fast as possible for 2023. So, look, Offaly hurling on the rise, and I suppose all the country would love to see it, because we need the more hurling teams at the top table, the better.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I think the more competitive it is, the better. Like and definitely the Leinster Championship would be brilliant up there with, you know, the likes of your Wexfords, your Dublins, Kilkenny, Galway, Offaly, like all battling it out. It definitely would make it fairly competitive over the next couple of years. Mayo, they were victorious over Tyrone. They won the Christy Ring Cup. Keith Higgins obviously lifting the Christy Ring Cup trophy, and obviously there was a victory for I believe it was it Fermanagh, I think, who won the
Fermanagh over Cavan,
Fermanagh, who won the Laurie Mark Cup as well. So congratulations to them. Just looking at the top four power rankings, I suppose, in hurling, like I suppose Limerick are probably top and maybe undisputable there, but I suppose after that, like, you could make a number of cases really. Waterford maybe number two, but then after that, I mean, I don't know, like what would be your top four there?
It's actually interesting. I've actually did an average scoring for all the teams so far, and judging by that ranking, it'd be Kilkenny number one. They've scored 229. They've averaged that in games, and then it's joint in second between Limerick and Waterford. So that just shows that'll be a titanic battle on Saturday. And Cork are actually bottom of the list despite getting so many goals in games. Look, maybe that's a sign that Cork haven't peaked to their full potential quite yet. But if you're asking me about my current power rankings, I'd probably go Limerick number one. They've been undisputedly number one over the last few years. Number two, it's a tight one between Waterford and Kilkenny, in my opinion, because I don't think Cork have proved themselves in the semi-final quite yet. You'd have to go Kilkenny. The way they performed, the way they put Dublin away, the way they put Wexford away eventually, and the way they performed in the league, you have to put Kilkenny number two, Waterford number three, and probably Cork number four. I don't think we've proved ourselves in the semi-final quite yet, but things could change over the next few weeks, and as we've seen over the last few years of the Hurling Championship, things could change within a week or two.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like, we've seen that quite a lot in hurling down the years, where like one team will be one team and then all of a sudden it's all up in the air. Like, personally, I'd probably have Waterford at number two, I think, with the fact they beat Kilkenny last year and given their two victories this year. But I mean, Limerick could go out and hammer Waterford, and then, like, you know, there'd be really kind of no question there. Top three hurlers in the year, like, who would you kind of have in the championship so far? You've obviously done an average score, and like what you said, so you'd probably know a lot more about this than me. Like, for myself, I mean, it's a bit of a tough one. You could look at Tony Kelly, but obviously he's not going to win it realistically. He hasn't had enough games. Like Tim O'Mahony, I think, has been brilliant for Cork and arguably gets in the question. And, you know, you could even look at Waterford, and if Jamie Barron continues his brilliant form, maybe he gets in. But who would you have?
It's very interesting. Yeah, I'd probably go Austin Gleeson as my first choice. I think he's been absolutely outstanding for Waterford, taking two sidelines, the pressure under him. And as I said, he's underrated, undisputedly underrated in the country. Another one for Kilkenny, Owen Cody. I think he's been absolutely outstanding in the championship so far. Young player of the year, obviously, last year. He's kicked on well. Third one, it's actually Tim O'Mahony's performed well. I think Kyle Hayes out of the wing backs has been outstanding for Limerick, and that goal epitomised it against Tipperary. Cade Lynch has led Limerick well. Tony Kelly, he should be in the conversation. He scored 342 in the championship so far. So he definitely should be in the conversation, but as you said, realistically he won't, because he got out in the qualifiers. It's unfortunate that way. I think it's kind of unfair that players are judged off that. I think they should be judged off their performance in general. It's probably unfair, but realistically, I don't think Tony Kelly will be up there with Player of the Year. He probably should be. And even few of the Clare players, Aid McCarthy, Cathal Malone, have been outstanding as well. You look at a few Cork players as well, Tim O'Mahony, obviously, Jack O'Connor, Pat Collins, I think has been a breath of fresh air goal. I think he's been outstanding. Robert Downey, I think, has done well around the back line. Niall O'Leary, I think, has been outstanding. Most of the Cork defenders have actually done very well. And you look at Kilkenny, I think Hugh Lawler has been outstanding. Waterford, Jamie Barron. For Limerick, obviously, Keith Lynch, Kyle Hayes. There's so many, but if I was pushed to pick 3, I'd probably go Austin Gleeson, Kyle Hayes, and Owen Cody in the end. But there's been so many good performers so far, and there's more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle Hayes completely slipped out of my mind there, but definitely worth a great shout, especially after that goal he scored, obviously in the Tipperary game, like one of the best hurling goals of all time, without doubt. Well, look, listen, we'll wrap this up here anyway. Matthew, cheers for coming on. Appreciate your time, and I suppose once again I'll link down your podcast down below for anyone to check it out.
Thanks very much, Aaron, and best of luck in the semi-finals to Dublin footballers. Maybe it's coming to an end, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens anyway. But hopefully, anyways, we'll get the job and keep an eye on the rest of the country for a few more years.